series. My name is Jeremiah, and I am thankful to be your MC for today. A little bit about myself. I am also the founder of a startup called Mantheos. We do people and company intelligence, and we are also actually incubated here at SMU IIE, who is the organizer of this event. So it brings me pleasure to be hosting today's session, and I'm really excited for what we have in store for everyone. But before we get into that, I would like to take a couple of minutes to just thank our supporters and our partners for the success that they've contributed to this event. First of all, I would like to thank our founding supporter, Wilmar International. Next, our other partners include DBS Foundation, IMDA, Kajima Corporation, NRF, OUE, Toyota Tsusho Asia Pacific, Sino Group, Prodigy Ventures, Sino Nanjing Eco High-Tech Island, and last but not least, Wavemaker Partners. We also like to give thanks to our strategic partners for making this event a huge success. Now that we're done with that, I would like to take the time to give you guys an introduction of what the Lee Kuan Yew Global Business Plan Competition is all about. Now, it is a competition that's organized by the SMU Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and the 10th Lee Kuan Yew Global Business Plan Competition, or LKYGBPC, is a university startup challenge that invites the brightest minds from all over the world to address some of the biggest challenges of the 21st century. Now, the 10th Biennial LKYGBPC was officially launched on the 25th of July back in 2019 with the theme Reimagine Smart, Sustainable and Resilient Cities. Now, the competition has received an unprecedented 850 submissions from over 650 universities across 60 countries. And out of all of those submissions, only 56 revolutionary finalist teams have been invited to compete at the finals, which we call Blaze. That's happening from the 18th to the 19th of March 2021. Now, instead of talking more about Blaze, let me just show you what it's all about.
Imagine a new world. History will be made at an event like no other. Meet the change makers, brightest minds, trailblazers, and witness the revolution. Be part of the movement happening right here. Join us at Blaze.
All right, so with the new normal, first of all, I hope you guys enjoyed that little teaser for Blaze next year, and I hope that encourages everyone to start signing up for the event that's coming next year on the 18th of March. But along with Blaze, with the new normal, we've also evolved in terms of the competition to now include a virtual program called the Changemakers Conversations. Now, this is a 4-part virtual panel discussion on a series of highly relevant and engaging topics. The very first Changemakers Conversations was held back in September, if you guys might recall, and the topic there was our new normal, where we had explored some of the opportunities that emerged out of the COVID-19 space, as well as the growing techno-nationalism. In today's second part, which of the Changemakers Conversations, we are inviting a very exciting panel of speakers to talk about the topic of urban sustainability. Now, before I take you through that, let me just bring you through the format and some house rules. So, essentially the boring stuff. The format of the session is going to be as such. We will first start off with the opening remarks from Ms. Shirley Wong, who is the chairperson of the Lee Kuan Yew Global Business Plan Competition Steering Committee, and that will be followed by the panel discussion on the topic of urban sustainability. And here are some house rules before we begin. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A section in your Zoom control panel that you see on your right-hand side, and we'll have our team here respond to your queries. If your questions are directed to a specific panelist or moderator, please indicate who you're directing them to, and we will get our best to get those questions answered during the Q&A segment. Now, the last thing is, for today's session, we've invited a very special guest. He is a live sketch artist that will help us capture today's discussion and insights and nuggets of wisdoms, all in the form of a graphic that we will share with you at the end of this session. So please do stay tuned for that at the end. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Shirley Wong, the chairperson of the 𝐂𝐸𝐺BPC Steering Committee. Shirley, please.
Hello, greetings and welcome, fellow change makers. I'm Shirley, chairperson of the Lee Kuan Yew Global Business Plan Competition and entrepreneur in residence of the SMU Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. The Changemaker Conversation is the headliner of the Lee Kuan Yew Global Business Plan Competition Blended Experience. During the first session that discussed at length our new normal, our illustrious panel of international speakers provided their analysis of the post-COVID world and what it would take to ride on global emerging trends. Post-event, we were most heartened to learn that participants found the conversations as provocative as it was enlightening. In the blink of an eye, we have arrived at the last quarter of the year and are now gathered for the second session of the Changemakers Conversation series, focusing on urban sustainability. The world today is awakening to the urgency to build more livable, productive, and sustainable cities in view of the mega trends of rising population, climate change, and resource scarcity and volatility. According to the World Economic Forum, the take, make, dispose approach to production and consumption had resulted in an astounding 92 billion tons of materials extracted and processed, contributing to about half of the global CO2 emissions. Even as demand for resources soar, the circular economy offers an alternative that can yield up to $4.5 trillion in economic benefits by 2030 if companies commit to the movement. We recognize urban sustainability as a prime and pressing opportunity for companies to rethink their bottom line as rapid global urbanization takes place and megacities swell and sprawl. During today's panel discussion, we will peer through different lenses from startups and corporates to communities and cities to accelerate our understanding towards the role of a global circular economy in reconciling economic progress with human and environmental well-being for the future generations. Our esteemed panel will also share insights into the opportunities that lie in wait for leaders and innovators who are daring enough to capture value during these disruptive and pivotal times. As Henry Ford had aptly put, a business that makes nothing but money is a poor business. May we harness this platform for inspirational dialogue that will mobilize action among innovators, the private sector, and the public sector to make positive impact for future generations. With that, I warmly welcome you to the second session of the Changemakers Conversations.
Thank you, Shirley, for that. And you know what? I think that sets up really nicely to introduce our esteemed panel of moderators and panelists. So today we are very blessed to have two moderators joining us and helping us to moderate the panel discussion. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Paul Santos. Now, he is the managing partner for Wavemaker Partners, and he has led the establishment of the Singapore headquartered Southeast Asia office in 2012 and has made over 100 investments across Southeast Asia, with over 80% of them in enterprise and deep tech startups. Paul, can you just give a wave to our audience members? There we go, perfect. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Winston Chow, an Associate Professor of Science, Technology and Society for the School of Social Sciences and Singapore Management University. Now, his research interest includes urban vulnerability to climate change, urban heat island science, impacts and mitigation, now sustainability in urban climatology, and perceptions of environmental and climate change in tourism. So he's definitely going to be very useful for our topic of discussion today. Prof. Winston, could you give us a wave as well? There we go, perfect. And those two are our moderators, so please welcome them for me. Next up, I would like to introduce our panelists. Now, our panelists are also a very strong lineup of people within the sustainability space. First of all, we have Mr. Paul Gabie, who is the CEO of ecoSPIRITS. Now, ecoSPIRITS is an early stage technology company that has developed the world's first low carbon, low waste spirits distribution system. And he is also the co-founder and CEO of Proof & Company, one of Asia Pacific's leading independent spirits companies. Paul, maybe you can give a wave as well. There we go. Next up, we have Mr. Nick Halla, who is the Senior Vice President for International Impossible Foods. Now, Nick joined Impossible Foods as its first employee and has helped build the company from a ground up. And since then, he has held numerous executive roles at Impossible Foods and currently serves as SVP and oversees the company's growing presence around the world. Nick, if you're there, maybe you can drop a handshake as well, just a little wave. There we go. Perfect. And last but not least, our lady of the panel, Ms. Fengru Lin, who is the CEO of TurtleTree Labs. And as the CEO, she leads the overall TurtleTree Labs team. And what started out as a passion of making cheese turned into a hunt for good quality milk, and now creating milk from cells. So we're definitely interested to find out more about that. Fengru, can you just also give us a wave over there? There we go. Perfect. Now, you have an incredible lineup of sustainable food tech heavyweights when you can essentially assemble quite a well-balanced meal. You've got your meat from Impossible, you've got your cheese from TurtleTree Labs, and then you've even got a drink to top it off. So that's just something interesting for everyone. But without further ado, I'm just going to pass the time over to our moderators, Paul and Winston. Please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Jeremiah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to one and all. Thanks for joining us in our Changemakers conversation today. My name is Winston Chow. I'm pleased to, together with the other Paul, hi Paul, we will be your hosts in this journey over the next 50 minutes or so. In my day job, I teach and research a lot about climate change and sustainability in cities. It's a very exciting field. It's been the focus of a lot of attention because of the numerous and varied sustainability challenges that we face in this particular century. So it's the part of the reasons for this would be the, shall we say, the detrimental impacts arising from environmental and climate change that affects all of us in cities, that is combined with the vast and rapid rate of population growth that has been occurring worldwide, and particularly in this region in Southeast Asia. So by the middle of this century, we are expected to have about 70% of the world's population live in cities. So you can expect, conservatively, almost a doubling from 3 to about 6 billion people living in settlements worldwide. In Southeast Asia, we expect the doubling as well, from about 280 to about 560 million people who will live in the mega cities in our region. So when you think about it like this, the combination of these two drivers, you can think that it leads to a lot of different risks, socioeconomic risks, and also risks in terms of how you feed very hungry cities, both today and in the future. And how do you make this, how do you make this change sustainable? So the risk segues towards opportunities. And we are very fortunate to have 3 speakers here who have applied technology very well to address this opportunity towards a very sustainable end. Before we actually start the conversation, and in my classes, I always tell my students, we need to define our terms very well. So in this sense, sustainability, very broadly, is just meeting the needs of the present with an eye towards the future. And that is the essence of any sort of definition on sustainability in any particular context. I also tell my students that it's not a theoretical or an academic term. It is grounded, it is real, it is very bloody difficult to be sustainable. And the last thing is that it is also very personal. is very personal. We don't deal with the sort of airy-fairy motherhood statements that tend to dominate a lot of conversations about sustainability. In this Changemakers conversation, we want to hear the very personal stories that drive these our three very honored guests in their sustainability journey. And I think at this point, you guys are probably sick of hearing the academic perspective. Let's hear the personal stories from our three guests. I'll pass the floor over to Paul Santos. Do you have anything else to add?
That's a great segue to the conversations, right? So we'll just go through our panelists. I guess the first question is really just taking off from the point that it is a personal journey. I guess, what brought you here? Like, where were you at? Eventually, what problem did you decide to solve and how you're doing it today? And we'll go reverse order, I guess. So Fengru, we'll start with you, ladies first.
Sure, thank you. So I'd like to start off by saying I am an alumni of SMU and very proud of the school here. My background was I studied in IS. I was part of ISM, Information Systems Management. So I graduated to work in big tech companies like Salesforce, companies like Google. And from there, I started to pick up the need for building a sustainable business, giving back, especially for Salesforce, they have that 1-1-1 model. So I really try to replicate that in TurtleTree today. So how I got started to get to know milk a lot better was a few years ago. I was learning how to make cheese as a hobby. And I was quite crazy. I even went to Vermont to learn how to make cheese for a few weeks. So I know good milk, I know how good milk should perform. And I tried to replicate that whole process back in Singapore. I went to Indonesia, I went to Thailand, and I was looking for good sources of raw milk. But soon I saw challenges, things like contract farming, things like hormones and antibiotics that are being pumped into the cows. As a result, the milk quality really suffers, and I couldn't make the cheese I wanted to make. So back then, I was still working for Google, and that was when I met Max, my co-founder. He was at Google sharing about different technologies, companies like Memphis Meats and Blue Nalu, who are using cells to make meat and seafood. So that was really intriguing to me. I went to him, we started a conversation, and we started to explore different methods that we could adopt, similar methods to create milk. I needed a full composition of milk, not just whey, not just casein, but everything from the fats, carbohydrates, proteins, everything. So we decided the best way to do it is really to create the biofactories that would create the entire composition of milk, which is where we adopted this cell-based method. So last year we made some breakthroughs, we filed our patents, and now we are just scaling the company. We have a team of about 20 full-time scientists and engineers.
Great. And we'll go reverse order. Nick, Impossible Foods, I mean, what a ride. Employee number one now, sort of scaling across the world, but yeah, before impossible was impossible. How'd you get there?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I've kind of been chasing sustainability and running from food most of my life. And then for Impossible, they came together, which was not planned at all. So I grew up on a dairy farm in the Midwest in the US. And I think just growing up on a farm taught a lot of things, but it definitely built a connection to the land, the environment, and sustainability. And because our job as farmers is to produce good food affordably, scalably, while maintaining our land and handing it down to our future generations. And it was very clear that that last part was tough. It's hard to drive a business and grow a business in agriculture as a small family farm and be successful from a just business perspective. And then sustainability too. It's like, yeah, it's a challenging system if you look at groundwater use, land degradation. And so there's a lot of changes there. But at that point, I didn't see that. I just kind of saw, yeah, farming is a really hard industry, especially dairy farming where you work at 365 days a year. The vacation is maybe go to the big city of Minneapolis and spend it one night in a hotel. But, and I knew I wanted to do something in sustainability. I studied chemical engineering. I did some biofuels projects, energy storage, some just a combustion engine, helping them burn cleaner projects in undergrad. But I had no idea what I would do with that as a kind of small town farm kid at that point. And I ended up working at General Mills. So I was like, when I left the farm, I was like, all right, I'm done with farming. Then I went to General Mills, well, I'm kind of in food again. That's kind of interesting. But it was a good job to learn how to build products, commercialize products, anywhere from being in a consumer's home to being on a manufacturing site, making it happen. And so learned a lot about how businesses run. And then about 3 or 4 years into that, I decided, like, you know what, it's a good time to actually go chase that sustainability vision. And so I went out to grad school, did an MBA MS, focused on commercializing renewable energy, because that's where I saw the impact of technology, science, and big global impact. And so I tried to start 8 businesses during grad school, all in some sort of energy production, transmission, transportation systems. Had a lot of fun. Some of them had some legs to them, I think, that went places with other people, not by me. And I did like nothing in food and agriculture in grad school. It was all based on energy because that's where I saw the impact. And then I met our founder, Dr. Pat Brown, and he had the idea for Impossible. He was a med school professor at Stanford for 25 years. Also, he had done nothing in food in his life. It was all medical research of cancer and genomics. But he took a sabbatical in 2009, looking at how he could have the biggest impact on the world as a biochemist. And he quickly realized our use of animals for agriculture is by far the least sustainable and the most impactful industry to the environment. 45% of the world's land use, more than 25% of fresh water, more greenhouse gases than transportation. If you look at an animal as a technology, an animal converts plants into things that we love to eat. And so from a biochemist perspective, we can create products that can outperform the animal, and that's what we have to do. And we actually just published our impact report for 2020 a few days ago. And one of the comments we made in there is like, if you would change the system over today from animal agriculture to plant-based and let the methane come down in the atmosphere since you're not producing as much, let the vegetation grow back up, in 20 years, we'd have the same greenhouse gas emissions in the environment and the atmosphere than we have today. Just because you can change that system so much. And the impact on the agricultural system for the pending crisis that's hitting us more and more every year is stark. And so for us, the mission is really critical. And for me, it took me back to my roots. And I remember when I talked to Pat for the first time, I called my brother, who's like the farmer in the family. And he's the one who told me, like, no, this is great. The way of life that we had doesn't exist anymore. Our job as farmers is to produce good people and hand down and maintain that land and improve that land over time. And that's really not happening. And that's our goal of what we're trying to do.
Great. Paul, Gabie?
Yeah, and Nick, it's interesting you refer back to sort of your childhood and growing up where you did. I actually was born in Vancouver on the west coast of Canada and was a child of the early 80s. And that was really the early years of the environmentalist movement in the Northwest and, Canada, northwest of the US and west coast of Canada. And so I grew up around the movement to save the rainforest, to save the whales. It was just part of culture. It was still fringe back then, but it was part of culture on the west coast of North America at that time. And went off to college, spent time on Wall Street in the early 2000s as a lawyer, wasn't in sustainability, wasn't headed to a future career in sustainability. And then as Jeremiah noted at the outset, founded a spirits company here in Asia Pacific more than 10 years ago, based out of Singapore, and really got into craft spirits, which became a big movement in our sector, in the beverage alcohol sector. Craft spirits, small producers, family producers all over the world, taking growing market share in the spirits industry. But in so doing, we ended up growing quite quickly, became one of the fastest growing players in Asia Pacific, but ended up with a very complex supply chain. So even for a smaller independent player, moving hundreds of thousands of bottles of spirits around Asia Pacific, a good tequila from Mexico or a London dry gin from a craft producer in London, out to Asia Pacific across 3 hub warehouses in Shanghai, Melbourne, and Singapore, satellite warehouses in Auckland, Sydney, Hong Kong, Macau, and just ended up moving a tremendous amount of glass as part of our business and value chain. And ecoSPIRITS came out of that experience. I didn't plan to be in sustainability as a career, but we first came to the idea through the challenge that the lack of sustainability was imposing on our industry, the cost, the complexity, the burden of moving these goods and inventories around the world at long distances and then distributing them across a region like Asia Pacific. So ecoSPIRITS, I think, in my career in sustainability was fortuitous, and it came out of a business realization that single-use glass at this scale, 40 billion bottles in the spirits industry this year, doesn't make sense. And beyond that, it's extraordinarily expensive to produce, move, handle, warehouse, deliver that single-use glass. And so ecoSPIRITS and my journey in sustainability in some ways is full circle. I feel like I'm back to my roots in the environmentalist beginnings that I had in the Pacific Northwest, and and really just feel very fortunate to have found my way back and come full circle.
Those are great stories. And if I could jump in, one of the things that I would like to press you guys on is that you spoke about your motivations for going into sustainability and trying to effect change in your businesses. But you know that that very trite saying that it often takes a village to to have a successful outcome. How did you guys get and assemble a team of people who share your interests, or who have been I wouldn't say who have been persuaded by your vision so that you can have a successful outcome? Would you like to, are there any details you'd like to share with the audience here? If I could start with Fengru first, because ladies first, please.
Sure. I think for us, it's really important to tell a story. The storytelling was really important for us to allow people to understand what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, when we dive down into the nitty-gritty, it gets pretty technical. So to be able to paint that story and have that story being able to be passed on to a 12-year-old, and she can pass on to her family members, that is a story that everyone can relate to, and that is something that is easily possible. So I think the storytelling is the most important thing in our talent recruitment, in talking to investors, in talking to even students or people from the community. That's the most important thing for us.
Yep, thanks. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think for us it was interesting where the first 3.5 years of the company, we were stealth. So no one knew who we were. So there wasn't any public recruiting. It was always through networks in that regard. And we had built the team probably up to about 75 people at that point, all really on the science side. And for us, it came to a few things that were really critical. One, Pat Brown, our founder, is one of the top scientists in the world. And so when we're hiring and building a science team, you have a chance to go work on a project effectively that is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, insanely impactful. And so it's almost doing we're hiring out of grad school. You can do like an extended postdoc and work on a problem that could have a bigger impact than anything else in the world with one of the top scientists in the world. It's a pretty good pitch. I think we got most of the scientists that we offered jobs to. And then it is definitely telling stories going forward. It's like for us, it's such a big vision. It's like our goal is to produce products that outperform anything an animal can do. And it's a really big challenge. And so hiring people that look at that and say, actually, I'm really motivated by challenges like that. And the impact if it works is huge. Let's jump on, let's make something happen and just try stuff, push boundaries and see what happens and move forward. And so we hired a lot for creativity. We hired a lot for the values that we have. One of our first values was be kind. Kind to the world, kind to each other, kind to our partners and our consumers. Move forward really quickly and taking responsibility. It's like, if we don't do this and we don't drive this, no one else will. And as we wanted a people that kind of live those values on a day-to-day basis, and those continue to evolve. But yeah, hiring is tough to grow teams. We found out, I think that's one of the learnings, is it always takes longer than you think, but when you get the right people in the right room, a lot can happen.
Yeah, those are wise words. Paul, over to you. I mean, should it be easy to persuade people to join you, since you're dealing with a very liquid business that is very popular in cities? I mean, what say you?
Well, I mean, being in spirits and cocktails does help. But I think, in terms of my comment here, one thing sustainability, technology, and innovation companies do benefit from more often, and I think you see it with Impossible, you see it with TurtleTree, is clarity of purpose. Something that any audience can understand in 30 seconds. Young audience, old audience, specialist audience, generalist audience. What Impossible is doing in terms of tackling the problem. Same thing with TurtleTree. ecoSPIRITS, it's very simple. Our problem, our mission is to end single-use glass in the spirits industry. That's a simple, clear, there's clarity of purpose there that does give people a chance to connect quite easily with what a company is setting out to do. So I think that you see right now across the sustainability innovation space, companies benefit often from that clarity of purpose, and that makes hiring, attracting, developing, keeping great people easier than in more traditional sectors, I would say.
Cool. Let me jump in with maybe a two-part question. So the first part is, you guys are, going after really big things. Like, these are big dreams that you're going after, and any entrepreneurial journey is, there's a reason they use the cliche, a roller coaster, as you go through that journey, right? And so let's talk about two parts of that roller coaster ride. So the first part that I'd love for you guys to share, because I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience who are going through their own, is your favorite oh shit moment. It's like, oh shit, what have I done? Or oh shit, are we gonna be able to get our way out of this? And whatever that is. And then the second part of the question, so that there's a happy conclusion, is there's also a point in your journey where there's a moment where you say, you know what, this thing could work. This thing could actually work. And it can be a small thing, it can be a big thing. But maybe the second part is, what was that moment in your business that you told yourself, you know what, this thing's got a chance, this thing could work, and I want to press forward. So if you don't mind sharing that, again, we'll just go follow the merry-go-round. It seems to be working. Why change it? So Fengru.
Well, my idea seems to be most innovative since I start first. So thanks. Well, I think some of the early shade moments are when me and my co-founder, we got together, we had this great idea, and we started talking to investors. And investors asked us, you two are two founding partners who are not scientists. Who is leading the science team? What gives you the right to be leading a deep tech company? So initially we had a lot of questions like that. One investor even asked us, I think you should get a Nobel laureate on your team before I would invest in you. So it was quite shocking to us. But after a while we pressed on. We realized that it is precisely because we're not scientists, we are able to learn a lot. We talk to everyone from the industry. We talk to molecular biologists. We talk to cell biologists. We talk to bioprocessing teams. So we are able to activate the right resources globally to bring the best resources into our team to accelerate each part of our R&D. So this has allowed us to be a lot faster than our competitors, to be able to pull the best to accelerate our progress. So I guess a word to the business folks out there, it's really about our ability to persuade and engage the right team to bring them in.
Okay, yeah, we'll go to the second round later. So Nick, as you're doing impossible, share some war stories, please.
There's always lots and lots and lots of war stories.
Your favorite ones. Your favorite ones.
Favorite ones. Well, I'll use one that I was driving really heavily for the first couple of years. And so we had a hypothesis, and Pat really came in with this when we started Impossible, that there's a protein in meat called myoglobin, which is a heme protein, which you can think about as like hemoglobin in your blood. And myoglobin is in meat, and it's very prevalent. And the hypothesis was that that's going to be important for what makes meat so delicious, or something in meat anyway. And so as we started doing the research, started finding stuff, but we had to get something to kind of prove this. And so you look at this, and in plants, you take the soy crop, and there's about enough heme in the root system of the soy crop in the US to replace all beef in the US. But it's in these little root nodules, these little balls on the root systems of soybeans. And so I was building in, I don't know how many pieces of equipment I built. And I was back on my brother's farm, my cousins, set up farms in Argentina and Texas, and doing all this stuff and building equipment, trying to harvest the stuff. And we'd spend a week, plowing through fields, picking the stuff, extracting the heme protein from it. And we get enough for a handful of burgers. And we're like, all right, so this is definitely not working. But you start doing the models, like, okay, under these assumptions, it can work. So you try to convince yourself it can work. And then just after like a year plus of this, it's like, I don't know if this is going to be possible to do it this way. And luckily, we had such great scientists, we pivoted to a fermentation technology and using yeast fermentation to scale, which has worked extremely well. But there are definitely days in the fields of Texas when it's 100 degrees beating down on you, and you can literally like look into Mexico. There was a point where I think I was in Texas looking north into Mexico in one of the fields we're in. And it's like, it was very interesting to kind of build systems that way. And that really honestly didn't work. But we found a different way. What it did get us is it got us to the point where we could prove that heme was really powerful in making meat what it was. So it got us enough where we could prove that, file our patents and technology. And then we just had to find a different way on how to produce it. And our science team did an amazing job finding a better way. And then I didn't have to go back on the farms all the time, which I was very happy about.
Cool. Paul?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Paul. You know, we're a circular economy company, and I saw the intro there. There was touched on the importance of circular to a sustainable future in an urban world. And, you know, circular is circular. It's 360 degrees. And I think we started the ecoSPIRITS journey in 2016 here in Singapore, have done all the engineering here in Singapore, quite proud of that, filed our core patent in 2018 here, and developed what was called an ecoTote, which is a closed loop last mile vessel that solves, in hindsight, only about 30 degrees of the 360 degree that you need to solve in order to scale this. And that was the breakthrough. You know, the 2016 aha moment when we came across the idea was that last mile solution. But as you get into circular problems, you realize that you're not developing one technology or one element of a solution. You have to solve completely the entire 360 degree solution. So I think if I look back in those early years in this bright moment where we felt we had developed this sort of simple but game-changing technology for our industry, and then now I look forward and we've had 6 other major equipment, hardware, technology developments in order to complete the system. You know, don't underestimate the challenges that successful innovation in sustainability requires. And in circular, anyone who's embarking on a journey towards circular solutions and technologies, remember, you have to solve every aspect of that 360 degree loop. And, you know, if you don't, it breaks down and it's not scalable and it's not profitable. And so that sort of oh shit moment, Paul, I think was realizing that our bright idea was only sort of one link in a much longer chain.
Yeah, it's bigger than you thought. Okay, back to you, Fengru. So people questioning why you guys, you know, have a right to play. You're not scientists. Oh shit. And then you press on. So what's that moment where you say, oh, maybe, you know, it's the positive oh shit. It's like, oh shit, this could work.
Well, I think we managed to, the fact that we managed to bring in quite a team of wonderful scientists, to the point that they started to think outside the scientist box. They started to think a lot more commercially as well. I think that was the point that was proudest for Max and I, when they start to think of how they can help to save money, how they can help to accelerate some of the R&D by working with certain collaborators. I thought that was the best. And also being able to work with global collaborators and convince them of our vision and our mission. I think that was also one of our big successes.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Like,
yeah, it's I think is when you're trying to like change like a system, you have to have such strong, and just in entrepreneurship in general, such strong conviction from the start and ongoing. So like from day one when I met Pat, like his personal conviction was, this is going to happen, it has to happen, and we're going to make it happen, and there's nothing's going to stop us. And that never changed no matter what obstacle we ran into. And, you know, I picked that up pretty early too. And it's like, we ran into tons of obstacles, but it was never to the point where we said, this isn't going to work, because it has to work. And you just look at the efficiency of an animal, and an animal like a cow from converting plants to meat is about a 3% efficient technology. And just look at that as like, okay, that's the system. We're not going to do that long-term that way. That doesn't make sense to feed 7 going on 10 billion people. And so like, we always had the general take that it's going to work. How to get there, we had no idea, especially early on. We're still not all the way there about how we're going to do it, but I mean, we're getting more progress every day. And I mean, I think for moments in general, I think there's some moments that stand out. I don't think there's any that we'd say that this is the time where it's like, oh, now it's working. Because it's always really little pieces that work. It's like when we kind of learn, you know, that heme really works is definitely a moment. It's like, oh, we have something that really looks powerful. That is different than what's been out there for a while before. And that really connects to meat, because you have to, for us, apply to the hardcore avid meat lovers. We're not making products for vegetarians and vegans. It's for the most stringent meat lovers in the world. And then, you know, when we started doing our first prototypes a couple years into the company, they were bad. And so it's like you're 2 years in, you're doing prototypes, and yeah, some of our sensory like scorecards are pretty entertaining to read.
What version number, Nick, did you say this was tasty already? Like how many years or how many did you count?
like fundamentally different versions were probably on 20-ish or something, like for where the whole thing is just, there's fundamentally big differences in the product. Incremental, we're in the probably, I don't know, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands at this point. I don't know. Maybe it's
They're not kidding when they say it's hard work, right?
Right. It's like our team is like, our scientists are making multiple prototypes every day. You know, it depends on what part of the team you are and what part of the creation system you are. And then you'll do your own tasting, and a lot of those aren't going to go well. So you're not going to bring any other friends in if you're nice anyway. And then you'll do, you know, when something gets somewhere, then you pull in a few other scientists, you do another one, and then you kind of scale it up to more of a trained panel, then to consumers and things like that. And, you know, the day-to-day experiments that are created, it's, you know, dozens of prototypes made every day. Trying different things, whether it be about flavor, texture, experience, cost, affordability, scalability, different, you know, different formats and whatnot. So yeah, it's, I mean, being in Hong Kong for the last 9 months, I've missed being in the lab where you can just do the tastes on the day-to-day basis. Like, hey, we have something new, you want to come over? I was like, yes, you got to always try the fun stuff. That's the fun part about, you know, creation.
Okay, Paul, so 20 degrees to 360 is kind of like, there's 340, right?
Yeah.
So when did you decide that, okay, this could work?
Yeah, I think there's two, you know, Nick touched on something interesting. The fact that we're using a system that is 3% efficient, or 7%, whatever it was, Nick, to feed the planet is so stunningly clear that that's not a long-term solution for us as a species or an urban environment. In spirits, it's similar. You know, the single-use glass bottle is more valuable than the spirit it contains when you break it down. You've got a packaging element that actually costs more to produce than the ultimate good that the consumer is purchasing. And then you add on shipping, cost of handling. So you've got this system that's driven by a packaging solution developed in the 1880s when we finally began to mass manufacture glass that makes no sense in any big picture scale. And so the problems that we get to tackle in the sustainability innovation movement now are sometimes so clear. And that's really, that is a bit of, that's the early aha moment, that this is a problem that will be solved. You know, what you say there, Nick, with a system that's 3% efficient, it will get solved. It's only a question of whether it's the now in 5 years or 10 years, it will not stay that way. And it's the same thing with single-use glass. There's no way that humanity can scale and flourish and keep the planet alive by producing single-use waste on the scale that we do. So there's some early aha moments like that, Paul, that I think really make you confident this journey is worth it. And then secondary, I would say, as a Singapore-based technology company, is we learned over the last few years, as you know, Paul, having been around for our journey, that we can rapidly, quickly develop and iterate and improve hardware tech, you know, here in Singapore with the engineering base of talent we have here. Our team is in mainland China and Singapore. All of our lead engineering is done here. Our manufacturing partners in China. We can bring new generations of our hardware technology to market so quickly and so efficiently now that I think, Paul, as we started to release generation 2, generation 3, the new pieces that solve the rest of the 360 and began to do that at speed, that's when I started to feel that, yes, this is doable and we can really scale.
This has been a wonderful conversation so far. I mean, when it's highly personal, and I think there are lots of takeaways that the audience can pick up so far. And on that note, I'd like to also point out that I think we've been receiving a fair amount of good questions in the Q&A. I hope the three of you are ready to answer them. I'm going to pass the floor over to Jeremiah because I think he's been itching to try and say some of, or lead into some of the very interesting questions that have been asked in the chat. And also at this point, if I could prompt the audience, if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask, we don't want to keep it as a conversation just between, you know, the six of us. There's a fair amount of questions you guys have been dying to ask, and I think we'd be happy to answer them. So Jeremiah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Paul Winston. So absolutely, I think what we've seen so far is insight into how the journey really began for everyone on the panel. And now it's time for me to represent the voice of the audience and ask some of the questions that might be a little bit more hard-hitting, a bit more direct. And so on that note, I wanted to kind of take the first question from Michael. So Michael Au asks, our panelists spoke very passionately about sustainability. And I just wonder if profitability of their ventures had ever crossed their minds, especially when the going gets tough, and how do they actually overcome such real-life challenges? And I noticed in our course of conversation, we've never really spoken about the big dollar sign. So I just wanted to kind of bring that back and ask, I guess, present this to the panel. If anyone's interested, we can answer this. Maybe we can start from Nick. Nick seems to have a bright smile on his face right now.
Yeah, I think there's a couple numbers and this even comes from an investor perspective, right? I mean, investors are going to invest in your business, but they're going to look, number one, at do they think they can actually get a return at the end of the day? And that comes to revenue, profitability, scale, like sustainable businesses itself, not sustainability, but a sustainable business, which is a big part of sustainability. And so you look at a couple of numbers to start with in this, and one is animal agriculture is a $1.7 trillion industry. So starting off pitching and saying a $1.7 trillion industry, and then following up and saying cows are a 3% efficient technology. And you're talking to these investors, like, whoa, okay, that doesn't make sense. And so if you look at that from a cost effectiveness and a profitable business model, and you just take that and you say we use the same resources, and you now take the crops that are used for animal nutrition, and you take those and use them for human nutrition, or even better is you optimize the crops for human nutrition, not for animal nutrition from the start. There's every reason to believe we can be 10, 20 times more efficient than a cow ever could be. And if we're that much more efficient, all we have to do then is use that efficiency and say, can we produce products at less COGS, less cost than animal could? And every model shows you can. And it should be significantly lower. So then if you look at the market and you can say consumers are willing to pay this price, now if you can scale a system as you optimize to a lower cost than that, and you can give them as much or more value. And if you look at value, it starts with taste. It has to be a delicious experience. Nutrition can definitely beat animals on nutrition and health. Sustainability, very easy, and obviously that's the whole mission of Impossible. Public health, food issues and stuff like that is like, these are all benefits of the plant-based ecosystem that consumers do care about, different amounts in different parts of the world, and it becomes essentially a utility value question, and there's a lot more value to the consumer. And then I think the other part is, as you are scaling a business, and one thing that's very beneficial in the food world versus like the biofuels and solar world that I was working in some before, is that like solar energy, you're selling an electron. As a consumer, you don't really know where it's coming from. And so it's very hard without government subsidies to get a higher price for that electron. In food, as you're starting, now these systems are all built effectively for animal nutrition, the agricultural systems. And so you are going to start higher costs because you're producing hundreds of billions of pounds using animals. And now you're going to start at a small scale as you're building your brand. And so I think it's really important as businesses to, from the start, if you can, and in food, there are ways to do this, build a profitable business model where, every pound of product you produce, you make money, your distributors make money, your customers make money, and it might be higher price initially in the market, but as you scale that system down, you have a roadmap to how you can pull that down to something that can really compete in the mass markets. And food is such a diverse marketplace that there's a lot of room to start building brands, even when you're at small scale where your costs are going to be higher. But it is important that you have a very quick, a relatively quick path to a profitable unit economics.
All right, thanks for that, Nick. But I mean, just adding on to that, I was just curious, right, that, showing them the models of how you're going to achieve scale and bring that cost down is a fairly romantic way of thinking of things, right? Actually getting that cost down and actually achieving that scale, I would assume some investors might be quite skeptical. How do you actually go about convincing them, saying this is possible?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think early on you have to, in my experience and position, you have to have investors that believe as much in the mission and what you're doing as the business too, because they're the investors that are going to be behind your back through a lot of the bumps in the road that you are going to hit. And second, it's really important as you tell your story and you build your story of your company that you do start hitting some critical milestones along the way. So as you hit those milestones, you tell investors, we're going to do this. And if you deliver that, you start building credibility on your ability to start hitting your milestones. And then that makes it easier for the next wave of investors to come in. And it's never going to go exactly to your roadmap. And that's where, as you're raising money, as if you start a company, one of the rules is always raise more than you think you're going to need, because you're going to need it. And then it gives you the flexibility to build things and build your company the right way versus having to kind of pinch pennies if you need to. And in startups and entrepreneurship, you know, time is money. And moving quickly, it's like your investors are putting money in you to do stuff. And then your job is to start proving that you can actually accomplish what you're saying. It might not happen as fast or exactly the way you want, but you do get to where you need to get to. And that builds a credibility up with the investor world that you continue to be able to raise and grow your company.
Right, thanks for that. Paul, Gabie, and Fengru, did you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. But I completely agree with everything that Nick said. It's really about meeting milestones. And for us at TurtleTree, we also approach it on kind of a different angle. If you look at fluid milk, which is really our big goal at the end of the day, it's a commodity, right? At $2 a gallon, it's not something we can reach price point right off the bat. So quickly talking to industry, talking to investors, we knew we needed to focus on high value items that we can go to market even at today's prices. So we quickly focused on high value milk like human milk. And when it comes to human milk, we start talking about things like functional nutrition, bioactive proteins that are good for adults or babies' gut and brain development, or even complex sugars. So these are certain areas that we are focused on in early horizons, while the fluid milk is still the greater story of the company, and that's what we need to get to for price point.
Anything to add, Paul? Gabie?
And you know, the sustainability innovation is maturing now, and one of the things, you know, for the audience out there who may be considering starting a venture or tackling a problem like you see, you know, the companies we represent here are tackling, especially in circular, which is what I know, you can find problems in which solving them by definition is removing costs from the system. You know, with spirits and with circular packaging for spirits, we remove 70% of the total cost of the goods. 70% is either in the single-use packaging or in the handling and impact, the knock-on effects of that single-use packaging. And with circular technology, we remove 85% of that 75%. And ecoSPIRITS is a profitable company. We've been so since inception because we take that savings, that immediate unit cost savings that circular generates, and we redivide it up amongst the stakeholders, the producers of spirits, the distributors, the end venues that are consuming spirits as a savings. And of course, retaining some of the savings for ecoSPIRITS as the innovation provider. So you can find problems in which solving the problem generates excess value for everyone involved in the supply chain. And if you do so, and you find a way to you know, build your business model into it, there's a really, you know, powerful opportunity to be profitable early on as a sustainability company, and especially in circular, at least from our experience.
Right, thank you, Paul. And you know what, at this point, I think it's, I do want to try and include our moderators in the conversation, especially Paul, because, you know, your background is, I guess, on the flip side of things, you're looking at investments, right? So we do have a question from Vol Barasni. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. But the question is mainly for Paul Santos. And he asks, how do you know, evaluate a sustainable investment? How do you evaluate a sustainable exit? What exactly are you looking for in investments, especially within the sustainable space?
Right. Well, we're an early stage VC fund, right? And as you mentioned, even when you introduced us, we do enterprise and deep tech. And when investors ask us, you know, what part of that do you look for? And the honest answer is anything really where you have a compelling founding team, sort of tackling a really big problem and doing it 10 times better than whatever the existing solution is. If you're able to do that, you have a potential to create a really big business and generate the kinds of returns that our, you know, LPs or investors in our fund are looking for, right? So when we look at the sustainability related investment, the bar doesn't go lower. So on one side, you say, well, then that makes it harder. But as you've heard from all of our panelists, they actually make business sense, right? I would rather be working on problems like this than finding the next, I don't know, sorry, consumer thing or some brainless entertainment thing. I don't know. There's enough of people doing that. And, I guess in all transparency, like ecoSPIRITS is an example of a portfolio company of ours. So we put our money where our mouth is, and Paul wasn't kidding when he said they were profitable from day one. It's not every day as a startup investor that you can say, okay, I'm putting money and the valuation of this company is a profit multiple, right? Usually it's like some imagined number, but just with Paul, he was saying, hey, we actually have profit and we can scale this, and can you come in at a multiple profit? So Jeremiah, I wouldn't be so obsessed, as also all our panelists are saying, like you don't get a break, at least from a VC, that I'm doing good, therefore you give me a discount. No, you keep the bar, but innately, because of the problems you're solving and the value you're creating, the belief is you will get rewarded. And that's why for us, it's a cake and eat it too kind of bet, right? Like you can make a bet, get a return, and do good. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Great. I mean, I guess, Paul, does that sound, it sounds like, there might be an upcoming fund for Wavemakers focusing on sustainability. Is that right to say?
I mean, we actually took stock, right? So we've made, like you said, over 100 investments, right? And then we've been asking, what kinds of problems do you solve when you say meaningful problems? We mapped out our existing portfolio against the UNDP sustainability goals, right? There's 17 goals. And we said, okay, something to pass the sniff test. When you call something out that says it solves or helps achieve this goal, you want to be able to sleep at night and tell people, like, I really mean it when it's contributing. And about 67 to 75% of our existing portfolio, not even our future portfolio, 67 to 75% of our existing portfolio, we can say hand to heart, are trying to help solve these, achieve these UNDP sustainability goals. So yes, we didn't call it out up front. It wasn't part of our marketing, but it's just part of the thesis that we want to solve meaningful problems.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Paul Santos. But maybe we'll get a short snippet of opinion from Prof. Winston as a neutral.
I don't have much of an opinion, but I would like to use the moderator's prerogative to raise this question from the Q&A that Hansel asked, which is pretty close to my heart as an educator. Hansel asked, I'm currently teaching sustainability marketing as an elective course in university. From an industry perspective, what do you think are the essential knowledge, the skills and knowledges that students must know about sustainability and the sustainability process? So it's one of those things that as educators, we want to engage our students to see that, look, once you leave the university, you are in a market that requires your skills, that would need you to keep the sustainability vision that the three of you have been, promoting and keeping the faith, so to speak. So if you guys are hiring students, what skill sets will you guys be looking out for? Who would like to start first? Ladies first again, Fengru again.
Well, I think for me, somehow during interview sessions, you can feel if the candidate is does in her own personal control care about the environment and sustainability. I know in schools today, the whole curriculum is built around sustainability and circular economy, and it's so important. I'll quote Paul Pullman, right? It's no longer, we cannot continue doing business the way we are doing now because it's going to cost us more moving forward. We are starting to pay the price of harming the environment. So the skills and the behaviors of individuals that we want to take on are people who care, people who truly care about the environment as well as social impact. And I think it shows when we engage and interview these folks.
Okay, thanks, Fengru. Nick, what about you?
Very similar in that regard. I think, for students, it's not about the knowledge of sustainability. It's like if you're passionate, you care about it, that's going to shine, and you're going to have enough knowledge to come through. Then it's matching up what you want to do, the skill sets that you've learned in the school, and then the jobs. I mean, because you look at all, like any company that's for us, like as a consumer, product company, we're going to need pretty much every educational skill set somewhere in the company for different roles, whether it be consumer behavior, and you can have marketing philosophy type educations, and obviously all the research roles, engineering, international business. There's like law, like every major like undergrad is like there's skills that you're going to learn that are going to apply to our business. So then it comes finding the right job within the organization that fits the skills that you've learned and the passion for sustainability, as you're saying, and that has to really come on. That we test a lot in our interview process for the personal motivation, what you're doing, and how you kind of see the world in the future, and then how that kind of aligns with us, because we're going to be spending a lot of time together.
Thanks, Nick. Paul, Gabie, apart from, let's say, a high alcohol tolerance, what else will you be looking out for future, employees?
Yeah, I think the previous comments are great, and we talked about purpose as a company. Getting into sustainability as a career, your personal purpose, if you are drawn to sustainability for reasons that are deeply personal, and on your personal professional journey you can align personal purpose with either industry or company purpose, there's an amazing opportunity to love what you do, to get immense fulfillment out of the work you do with your team and joining a company. And so, we look for team members that are drawn to circular or sustainability out of a sense of personal purpose, that it resonates for them. It's not just a job in which to apply their marketing or sales or behavioral economics background. It's one in which they're aligning a personal mission or personal sense of purpose with the sustainability purpose of the company. And if you can get that alignment in life, I think we all feel very fortunate when we find that alignment in our professional lives.
All right, thanks. I guess what we'll do now is we only have time for about 2 more questions. I want to take this question, one last question from the audience, and specifically from Anse, and her question, I believe, is how has COVID-19 impacted all of your respective businesses? I mean, it's hard to shy away from that question, right? So I think maybe from the 3 panelists, if you guys could just take a minute or 2 to just kind of summarize how the entire journey has been like for you when since the beginning of the pandemic, and where you guys are at right now. And maybe we'll start with Paul, Gabie.
Yeah, I think COVID has been an immense sort of reset for the world and many industries, but I mean, it slowed things down this year, there's no doubt. Launching new products, launching new markets has been slower this year than it was in 2019 or 2018 because of the complexities, the challenges every country is facing. So it's been a more challenging year for sure. It's been a year in which the fundamentals are still the same, and the interest in sustainability tech is as high as ever, but things have moved slower. I really believe, though, that we are going to see 2021 onwards a form of green reset, in which as economies, as businesses, as consumers go back to a new normal, it's not the same normal, and that there's a chance for green and sustainable and doing things differently to be a big part of the next 5 years as a result of COVID. So I remain hopeful, even though this year has been challenging for us, like any company across the world.
What about Nick, Halla?
Yeah, and I'll agree with pretty much everything you said there. And the other thing I'll add specifically for the food industry, a lot of our partners, we started in food service, so selling into restaurants, top chefs, to our biggest customer in the U.S. Was Burger King at the time, and that industry got crushed because people couldn't go to eat, and food delivery went up, so that kind of helped, but then you didn't have import. Like, that whole industry had to change. So what we tried to do is support our businesses, our partners, any way we could, and just open up new initiatives to help them continue and build their business and maintain their business. So allowing them to sell product to essentially to consumers directly. We did that in the US, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And then the other pivot is we went from 150 doors in retail roughly to start the year, and now we're more than 15,000. And so you just looked at, retail numbers went up, restaurant numbers went down. As a business, we've continued to grow quite quickly all year, which a lot of businesses in COVID, you can't say that. And I think it does show the interest in sustainability, the interest in better products. And I think that is, COVID does highlight that. It did show it did expose a lot of the issues in our food supply chains, especially the really long food supply chains. Like an animal is a very long process through that. And so I think it just showed more and more to consumers too, that this is a process that we have to create a better way to make the meat, fish, and dairy foods that we consume.
And Fengru?
Yeah, absolutely. The issues in food supply chains, if you look at the US where they're dumping milk, it's just a heartbreak, right? You raise the entire cow, milk her, and then having to dump the milk just because you can't move it. And being in Singapore, we have to start sourcing milk, eggs all the way to Ukraine. I think this is really put the spotlight on the challenges around food security. And I guess being in Singapore, we are quite fortunate as TurtleTree. We are pre-revenue, so it didn't really affect any of our sales volume or anything like that. At the same time, Singapore is really supportive of the food tech companies. They actually allowed us to stay open with safe distancing measures, of course, during the COVID period, because we were deemed as essential business. So we are so fortunate to be based out of Singapore.
All right, perfect. So that brings me to, I guess, one last question. And I think Paul Santos suggested a very nice way to wrap up the entire session. And that's basically asking something that, you've learned in after your entire journey so far that you wish you knew when you started. So I think this would go out to our three panelists once again. Maybe we'll do reverse order. So Fengru can start and begin sharing.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sure. There were a lot of things that I wish we knew. Obviously, the different technologies that we could bring on board, the right type of inputs for our product development. I think one especially was actually the products that the industry was interested in. At first, we were all about the whole milk thing. I wanted to change the world. But price point was something that didn't come to me right off the bat. So it was something that we realized after talking to the Mead Johnsons, the Abbotts, the Fonterras. They told us, one of them even invited us to their dairy plant. Each of these costs upwards of billions of dollars. And they told us, like, is this something you want to build? You're trying to compete against us? So quickly we realized that it's not something we should be looking at. We want to be able to target products that the market needs and wants, which are these high value human milk components that we want to focus on.
Thank you for that, Fengru. What about you, Nick?
I think one thing I'll say that's a little tangent to this, but I think as you're growing a business and the way I look at it is you're making the best decision with the knowledge that you have at the point in time, and then you're going to learn. You're going to learn. You can look back and say, oh, I wish I would have done that different. But at that point in time, you made the best choice for what you had for information. And I think I found that to be really important from an entrepreneur's perspective, because you can second guess yourself every single day. There's days you have the highest highs and the lowest lows in the same day. And it's like, you just kind of have to try to even it out any way that you possibly can. And I think the other part I'd say is I tried to start, like I said, tried to start a bunch of different businesses during grad school. And people would always talk about, it's like, oh, communication breaks as you build businesses. You have to really focus on communication. And you hear it and you hear it and you hear it. So when we started the company, it's like, okay, I've learned all these tools, all these skills. We're going to solve this. Now when you go from 10 people to 50 to 150 to 600, the way you communicate, the way you operate, the way you run has to be fundamentally different. And it's like, we get taught that, but it's like, until you experience it, you don't realize how stark that difference is. And it's hard. It's like when you scale businesses, it's hard. And where you really break is the communication throughout the organization, the relationships, and how you kind of operate as a company. And for us, it's like we have very strong core values to who we are. Now, how those values show up has to change.
Absolutely. Let's do Paul. What about you, Paul, Gabie?
Yeah, I mean, Nick said you'll experience the highest highs and the lowest lows on these journeys, sometimes in one day or 1 week or 1 month. It's so true. I mean, I think my best advice to myself 10 years ago, 8 years ago, as embarking on these entrepreneurial journeys is don't be too hard on yourself along the way. These are difficult, complex journeys, not just the problem you're trying to solve, but to put an organization together that can perform, that can grow, that can succeed is an incredibly complex challenge. And there will be all sorts of outside forces that knock you off course along the way. Try not to be too hard on yourself as you hit those setbacks and when you experience the lows. If you can find a sense of perspective, take a step back for a moment or for a day. You'll make your own journey easier if you're easier on yourself.
I see. So I guess what I'm seeing from a general trend in all of your answers is, you can only do the best with the information that you've got at that point. And, mistakes are going to be made. I guess it's more important to focus on what you do after a mistake, how you kind of pick yourself up. And, for all of the founders out there that are considering starting something or are in the process of doing that, that's where you should turn your attention to. But I thank the three of you for your insights and giving us a brief look into the process of starting something in this industry. And so with that brings me to the end of the time that we have for this question and answer session. And while I have all of the panelists on video right now, I'm just going to take a sneaky opportunity to take a quick photo and a screenshot. So if everyone on your screen right now, if you can give the big brightest smile that you can possibly do, we can say cheese, we can say meat. I don't know what you want to do, but do me a favor and we'll take a photo, a couple ones. So let's just take one right now. So 3, 2, 1, say cheese or cell-based cheese. All right, do we got it? Okay, I think we got it. Okay, perfect. So with that said, thank you so much to our moderators, Paul and Winston, as well as to all of our panelists. I really want to thank you for taking your time out and being here with us. And if you guys have any questions that we may not have been able to answer, please just leave them in the comments. We will try to answer those questions if we can privately, offline. Or you can always add any one of these moderators or panelists on LinkedIn, and I'm sure if they have the time, they can also answer your questions. So thank you so much. And panelists, once again, thank you for being here with us. And I would like to obviously, we're very, very grateful for that. Okay, so moving forward, right now, I guess in the beginning, I did mention that we had a very talented illustrator who has helped to capture today's, nuggets of information, a summary of the session, all on a piece of paper using, I guess, graphic illustrations. So you can see, I think it's turning up on your screen right now. I personally think it's really cool. You have obviously the beautiful faces of all of our moderators. You have the beautiful faces of our panelists. And you can see, a couple of interesting insights that we've picked up along the way throughout today's session. So if you guys are interested in getting a copy of this, you will receive it in your recap inbox. So in your mail inbox. We will be sending out some recap emails. And secondly, if you also want to receive it, you can follow us on social media. We will probably be posting this as well. So yeah, definitely something that I'm gonna keep and maybe in the frame up, put it as my desktop wallpaper at some point. But thank you so much for that, Elliot, who is the artist of this. Right, so next, I want to kind of ask everyone that's watching this right now to share your thoughts on the panel discussion. It will only take a minute to help me fill in a really short survey by clicking on the link in the chat box right about now. I just want to get some of your feedback, which will be invaluable in allowing us to keep these kind of sessions relevant for you guys, and also keeping it open to the public for free. And I do thank you in advance for filling out that survey for us. Now, before we wrap up the session, the last thing that I will do, I promise it's the last thing, is to give you some information about the upcoming events in 2021. So first of all, I spoke about Blaze quite briefly in the beginning, and that's the grand finals of the Lee Kuan Yew Global Business Plan Competition, and that's happening on the 18th and the 19th of March 2021. This is where all of our finalist teams from all around the world will be coming together to compete for our $2 million worth of prizes. So that's definitely something that you want to add to your calendar right now. And secondly, as part of Blaze as well, there also will be the VC office hours from the LKY GBPC. Now, this is Southeast Asia's biggest congregation of more than 30 managing partners and partners who collectively manage over $6 billion of venture capital. And they are committed to providing pro bono advice, support to startup founders from all over the region. If you are an aspiring startup founder, I would not miss up on this opportunity. Now, last but not least, the next Changemakers conversations will be happening on the 18th of March. That is the topic of that will be digital transformation, where we will explore how startups are forging new frontiers and leveraging on collaborations throughout the region. And our final Changemakers conversations happening on the same day is titled Growth in Asia, where we will understand and look at some of the mega trends in Asia and how startups looking to expand in Asia should look at how they should be localizing in those relevant markets. So please, I've given you all the dates. I'm pretty sure that they will be jam-packed full of content and full of really good bits of information. So please mark them down in your calendars right now. You can also scan the QR code that you see on the screen right now to save the date and the details. Finally, before concluding this Changemakers conversation, I would like to take the chance once again to thank our partners in making this event a success, our founding supporter, as well as our platinum partners, our silver partners, as well as our bronze partners, and our investment partners, and last but not least, our strategic partners as well. So with that, once again, my name is Jeremiah. I have thoroughly enjoyed today's session, and I was glad to be able to take part as your